solely to properly document any public comment that we get, and also to do meeting notes for this meeting. I'm gonna wait another minute or two, and then we're gonna get started. All right, I think I'm going to get things started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission's Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, update for PennDOT District 11, covering Allegheny, Beaver, and Lawrence counties. My name is Dom DeAndrea, and I'm the Director of Transportation Planning here at SPC. Also presenting with me tonight is Ryan Gordon of SPC, who is the manager of our transportation program development activities. I would also like to thank and acknowledge SPC staff, as well as PennDOT District 11 staff from the three counties, Allegheny, Beaver, and Lawrence, that are here, and also staff from the transit authorities that all helped us as part of this process to deliver this draft tip. A couple of housekeeping items to go over. Please continue to mute your microphone and have your camera off. Questions must be entered into the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. Questions will be addressed at the conclusion of the presentation, and the presentation will be posted on SPC's website. Again, we're recording this meeting for the purposes of properly documenting any public comment that we receive in the chat box, and also to do meeting notes. Next slide, please. So this evening, we're going to go through transportation planning and the TIP development schedule, funding, the TIP investments in the region, major county projects. We're going to talk about support documents, public engagement and how to comment. And then at the end, as I said, we will take questions. Public comment on the draft 2023 TIP is now underway through June 7th of 2022. In June 2019, SPC adopted the region's official long-range transportation plan called Smart Moves for a Changing Region, which includes over $22.7 billion for the region's transportation priorities over 25 years. Smart Moves prioritizes programs and projects that advance the regional vision of a world-class, safe, and well-maintained integrated transportation system that provides mobility for all, enables resilient communities, and supports a globally competitive economy. The region's long-range transportation plan is implemented with a series of shorter-term investment plans known as the TIP. Each TIP, like the one currently out for public review, is a step along that 25-year investment in our region's future. Billions of dollars in state, federal, and local funds will be invested to improve our region's transportation system over the next 4 years. Next slide, please. This chart shows the detailed TIP development timeline. As you can see, there are many moving parts and points of coordination with our members and partners. This process started over a year ago in March of 2021 And this time around, we held about 8 work group meetings in each of the 3 PennDOT districts. We had extra meetings to incorporate the new IIJA funding, which became available recently. Next slide. During the TIP work group process, the 3 counties and District 11 submitted candidates for consideration to include into the TIP update. Previous public comments were reviewed and considered for candidate project inclusion. After discussions at the first 2 TIP work group meetings, the candidate list was shortened. Given the amount of projects that are being carried over from the current TIP to the 2023 draft TIP, the number of new projects is limited. Most of the new projects that get added to the TIP will be focused on asset management and safety. Next slide. So there was a downward trajectory in the region's TIP-based funds for highway and bridges when looking at the last 4 TIP cycles going back to 2015. With passage of the bipartisan IIJA law, the highway bridge TIP is back up to 2019 TIP levels. The additional IIJA funds are shown in the 2023 TIP as the light blue color on the right-hand side of this graph and represent an increase of about $500 million for the 2023 draft TIP. Next slide. In terms of transit TIP investments, the total federal and state transit funding for our region in the draft 2023 TIP is $1.9 billion. $1.5 billion of that, or about 72%, the big blue area there, is in operating funds. There is about $160 million in there for new buses and new LRT vehicles across the region. Most of the transit TIP is state funds. So, next slide, please. So, just breaking that down a little further, some of the significant regional capital investments include fixed guideway in terms of transit, fixed guideway improvements, renovations, signals, stations, hillside stabilization, and other improvements for the busways, light rail, BRT, and inclines to the tune of about $91.5 million. Also, in terms of Port Authority, we have fixed facility improvements, improvements to garages and other transit facilities, adding up to about $75.7 million. Also, under Port Authority, we have light rail vehicle procurement and planning and engineering for upcoming procurement of those light rail vehicles in the amount of $48.5 million. Also, Port Authority is planning to procure 184 new buses to replace older buses that are near the end of their useful life, and that funding is about $98.5 million. There are other regional transit vehicle procurements and other, including community transportation, and that amount is about $38.5 million. So with that, the next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Gordon, and Ryan's going to break out some of the highway and bridge investments.
Right? Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm going to spend the next few slides on some of the key points on the TIP funding on the highway bridge side, and then highlight some projects within each of the counties and within the city, and get a sense of just the highlights of what's in here. Looking at the highway bridge TIP base funds compared to the current 2021 TIP, our funds are up 26%. This is due to, as Dom said, the passage of the federal bipartisan Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. This has enabled additional federal formula funds to be added to our TIP base funds on the highway bridge side. The largest piece of this funding is really a new program, a new federal bridge investment program. That program has added an additional $211 million in federal funding for bridges throughout the region in the 4-year period. We've also seen through this additional federal funding. We've seen increases in what's known as our off-system bridge funds, and we've also seen increases in our transportation alternatives funding. On the state side, the revenue, with the revenue picture on the state side, we were down a little in highway funds to the tune of 10%, and also down in state bridge funds around 20%. So total base funding for the highway bridge program for the region is about 1.5 billion. Once you add in additional funds through the statewide managed programs, discretionary funding, and local funding, our total for the highway bridge tip is up around 1.7 billion. And so you can see that on the highway bridge tip, we have a diverse range of investment categories, as you can see here. The largest sector of this investment is the bridge section of that funding. So around about 41% of the highway bridge tip is dedicated to bridges. That's typically the case, but we've even seen more in terms of the additional federal highway bridge program that I spoke about earlier. So going down from bridge at 41%, we have our roadway projects making up 27%. We have an investment in efficiency and operations type projects. That's around 12% of the overall highway bridge tip. And then we have safety projects that make up around about 11% of the highway bridge tip, and down from there. We have an investment in things like transit or bike ped or multimodal in there too. So just to continue some stats here on what are we really investing in here with this 2023 draft tip. And you can see overall 740 million in the region's bridge infrastructure. I mentioned the new federal funding. We're investing in over 275 million in non-interstate NHS. That's National Highway System. That's like your kind of two-digit state routes, like 65, 28, 51, roads like that. Overall, it's going to show a 12.9% reduction in our poor bridges across the region. The draft tip is investing over 476 million in roadway infrastructure. It's investing over 195 million in safety projects. It's investing over 868 million on roadway and bridge infrastructure that also carries buses for transit vehicles. We've also included a 367 million on the region's freight network. And I did mention highway bridge before, or I did mention the bicycle and pedestrian improvement type projects. We are investing 22.9 million in those areas, including SPC's TA program and SPC's SMART program. So there are some additional transportation funding and programs that are kind of outside of the purview of what SPC directly puts together for the region's tip. However, these are still investments in transportation in the region. So we do note these sources of funding. We do note them in our financial summary, and we include information pertaining to them in the appendices of our tip document. And these would include things like the statewide interstate program, the Turnpike Capital Program, and a hodgepodge of additional non-tip state funds. And that's really things like PennDOT maintenance funds, county and municipal liquid fuels funds, discretionary maintenance funds, programs that are out there that are of a discretionary nature, like Green Light Go or multimodal. Those are the type of things we lumped into there. And then there's the large new turnpike expansion project 51 to I-376. That's also in our region. And that's just the total cost over the life of the project on that one. So looking at each of these counties a little bit closer, I'm going to give some brief highlights of each of the counties and the projects in some of these District 11 counties. Just keep in mind that in Allegheny County alone, there's something like over 130 projects on the 2023 tip. So the details of each county's detailed project list is available. The full list, full details are available in the document in Appendix 6 of the draft tip. So you can really dig into it deeply in that appendix material. I'm just providing a real quick highlight here. In Allegheny County, it's really, the story is, major bridge investment. We have $96.5 million just in kind of major bridge, either preservation or replacements. Most of these listed are major preservations, like US 2230 over the Parkway West, the Tarentum Bridge, the New Kensington Bridge, McKees Port Duquesne Bridge, and McKees Rocks Bridge. Those are all major river crossings or major roadway crossings. A couple other things to note are there's some roadway investments there. We always have a good bit of, like I said, 27% or so of the tip is roadway investments. You can see some notable roadway investments in Allegheny County. I've listed there to the left. Route 8, Route 51, sections of those roadways to be resurfaced, to be upgraded. Another thing to mention is parkway investment. Now we have a whole separate interstate tip that I'll get into here in a minute, but there are two projects that are within our region's tip, and that is the I-376 Parkway East active traffic management and the I-376 Banksville interchange improvements. I felt those were worth noting here. And then we have a large project up on I-79 with the intersection of 910 and the interchange improvements there, lumped together with another bridge on 910. So that's all entail a $44.4 million investment in 910. So moving on to just zooming in a little closer into the city. This shows some of the highlights of the tip update from within the city. These include significant investment in bridges, just like the county at large. Bridge investment continues to be large within the city. You can see here bridges owned by both PennDOT, the county, and city are all shown up here. You can see some of these bridges appearing. Over $22.5 million invested here. Or actually, I should say $39 million invested in this. So bridges continue to be a big focus within the city. A couple other notable things. We have a $22.5 million investment in something called the city's Smart Spines program. And that's really a series of corridors within the city that's going to be upgraded with coordinated signal improvements and coordinated, some intersection improvements and coordinated signals throughout the city in 3 different phases. You'll see some of the notable roadway projects within the city listed there. And then I also wanted to make note of significant investment in bike, ped, and transit to the tune of over $40 million. Listed a few of the things there that are specific projects that are on the highway bridge tip that are either transit or pedestrian type projects. I should say over and above this, we have, like I mentioned before, our TA program with SPC and our Smart Transportation program. Those projects have also approved projects for funding that will be both in the county and within the city. So moving on to Beaver County, we have some key corridors there that I've chose to highlight. Route 18, there's, three pretty significant bridges on Route 18 through Beaver County there to the tune of a $36 million investment. Also, Route 65, we've got some roadway preservation and two bridges on that corridor to the tune of about $14.8 million in investment. Notable SR 3007 Broadhead Road betterment and $9 million invested in that project and roadway preservation. And then we have two projects that are of a economic development nature that actually have received governor's economic development funds, and that's the Aliquippa East Gateway and the Monaca Gateway projects. Moving on to Lawrence. Lawrence County, we have two projects on significant bridges on SR 18, and those come to about an $8 million investment. We also have about $12.3 million in overall roadway preservation projects, 422 and Route 65 shown there, and then some notable bridge improvements as well in Lawrence County, and to the tune of about $14 million invested. So, like I said, those are just some of the highlights. And if you want to dive into like all the details of the projects in these counties, you're going to want to check out Appendix 6 of the actual TIP document. We have summaries in there by county. We also have all the details on every project descriptions, funding, the whole gambit of information on those projects. So switching a little bit to significant transit projects in District 11, and Dom already, kind of hit on the Allegheny County Port Authority, large investments, huge numbers on, improvements to busways, light rail, and fixed facility improvements, and even engineering and planning for light rail vehicle replacements. Those are there. In Beaver County, we're looking at purchasing 20 paratransit buses and replacing 3 fixed route buses, midlife overhauls of 6 other buses and to extend their useful life, and renovations of the Rochester Transit Center. In Lawrence County, we're looking at Newcastle replacing 5 buses to the tune of $2.9 million, and improvements to a bus storage facility that will hold 16 buses at a cost of around $3.9 million. And then Lawrence County Allied Coordinated Transportation Services are replacing 16 small transit buses as well. And there's some details over here on the actual operating assistance, huge numbers for Port Authority, and here's the other transit operators in the District 11 area. So earlier I mentioned in passing the statewide interstate program, and I mentioned that there are some other interstate projects within District 11 on 376. Now, this is the actual interstate TIP program. These are selected statewide. This is a statewide managed program. It's built at that statewide level. And we include the region's interstate TIP projects in the draft TIP appendices, and we provide information about those. And it's pretty significant here in District 11. We're looking at $236 million invested in I-79, and we're looking at $400 million invested in I-376. Again, that's the statewide managed interstate TIP program. So moving on to some of the supporting documentations that we're required to produce along with the draft tip. And before we can approve the tip, we have to produce these analysis and produce these reports. One is the air quality conformity report, and one is the EJ report, and I'll get to that in a second. So like I said, in order to pass the tip, we need to demonstrate that we're implementing the long-range plan in the tip, but that will not further worsen our air quality in the region, and that emissions of ozone precursor pollutants and PM 2.5 pollutants will remain below our emissions budget as approved by the EPA. So this slide and the next one, I'm going to show just the results of the 4 areas we have to model for these emission levels. The modeling reports and more detail are available in the air quality conformity document. So on this particular map, the blue shaded sections are showing the ozone non-attainment, that's areas that's set up by EPA. You can see the graphs at right show the emissions budget at the top for VOCs and for the NOx pollutants, nitrogen oxides. And you can see there's the budget at the top and then our emissions that we've modeled with these projects below. So you can see in both cases we're well below our mandated emission levels or mandated emission budgets. This is the map and charts displaying the PM 2.5. The purple shaded areas of the map are the Pittsburgh and Beaver Valley PM 2.5 non-attainment area that's been set by EPA. The graphs here at the left are similar to the previous ones, where the emissions budget is at the top and the curved line at the bottom is the modeled emissions with the draft tip and plan. So you can see again in both of these cases we are well below where we need to be in terms of our emission budgets. The other supporting documentation we produce is an environmental justice report. This is required documentation to identify any disproportionately high human or health or environmental effects of the TIP on low-income populations and minority populations. This ensures that our social equity in programming transportation investments, and including a full and fair analysis and participation from these potentially affected communities. You can see here the low income at left and the minority at the right. In terms of low income, we have 58% of our investments on the TIP are within low income areas, and that equates to about 51% of the projects. And looking at minority, we have 57% of the TIP investment in minority areas, which and that equates to 29% of the projects. I'm going to toss it back to Dom to close this out, talking about public engagement and how to comment.
Thanks, Ryan. So our public engagement to date, SPC has collected comments and suggestions through a number of avenues, such as from social media, our municipal and stakeholder outreach, and through our various committees. Our public participation panels, those meetings were held in October and November of last year, where we also received feedback. State Transportation Commission's online survey on the 12-year plan yielded over 600 comments and suggestions relative to our region. Also, the last draft tip that we had, we do take a second look at those comments as well. Next slide. So we are seeking input to our draft tip. The public comment period started on May 9th, The best ways to make comments, you can make comments here at this meeting and at our other meetings in the chat box. Written comments may also be submitted via email to comments@spcregion.org or via regular mail to our office here at 2 Chatham Center. All comments must be received by 4 p.m. on Tuesday, June 7th. Upon consideration of the comments received, our commission will consider approval of the draft TIP documents at their meeting at 4:30 p.m. on Monday, June 27th, 2022. Next slide. So this slide provides two links. The top link, I believe, will take you to our draft documents. The comment area is right on our main homepage. The bottom link is a story map which nicely summarizes the process that we undertook for this draft tip. Ryan, I don't know if you want to click on any one of those just to show it. So this is the page that has our documents, right?
You scroll down, plan amendment here, tip documents are located here. We have the main report here, appendices here, and the two documents that I discussed, the air quality conformity determination and the environmental justice report. And then this block will take you to the story maps. And then down below is how to comment, and this is just exactly what Dom just reviewed on that. So, yep, that's where you go for within our website. You come up to our main page. If you want to get to it from the main page, this is the main page. You can get to it just by scrolling down here. Public comment on the draft 2023 to 2026 tip. Just click there, and it'll take you right back to where I was just at.
So with that, I just want to thank everyone for participating in our meeting this evening. I think I'd like to ask Shannon, our communications director, to look at the chat box and see if we have anything in the chat box.
Okay, hi, thanks, Dominic. We do. I believe this is from Don Carter. He says his comment is relative to bridge and roadway investment, are complete street concepts being integrated with new construction or restoration. 2230 over Parkway West, for example. When Smart Moves had its public process before the pandemic, I remember speaking to a staff member discussing the need to provide dignified non-car passage between retail job centers in Robinson and residential centers in Oakland and Imperial, especially more affordable mobile home communities. It was noted back then that there was not an awareness that people without cars use the existing bridge for that purpose.
So I will say the short answer to that is yes, complete streets. We have programs here at SPC, our discretionary programs like transportation alternatives and our smart transportation program, where we're funding, and these are part of our tip, we're funding complete streets projects. I'm not sure if that specifically answers the question, but I don't know if anyone else has. Ryan, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I think here I would take the opportunity to mention PennDOT's PennDOT Connects process, by which these projects get looked at from all aspects, with representatives from the municipalities involved. I know that these type of integrations of bicycle or pedestrian accompaniments are discussed. I know that's one of the things that the PennDOT Connects process talks about. So when there's the ability to provide that type of accommodation, it's discussed. And of course, it comes down to making sure that the district understands what the community wants, and understanding, we can't do everything all the time, but I know it's a main check off on what's discussed. And yeah, it's continuing to integrate bicycle and pedestrian throughout the project development and project delivery process. I don't know if
And those connects meetings and that connects policy, those connects meetings are held very early on in the project process. It's at the very beginning. John, I know we have John Quatman here from District 11. John, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Yeah, the PennDOT Connects process does, look at these elements before a project is even born, really. We consider these things early. We consider these things even during a project development to see if it's something that could be implemented into a project or at the beginning of a new project. We have a PennDOT Connects process, here with the district, and we work with SPC with that, with central office. We also have a district planner here on staff that is pretty much the liaison between the district and SPC and central office to implement this PennDOT Connects. And we can certainly share some contact information and any more detailed information that may not have been included here.
Thanks, John. Shannon, I think
Okay.
Don Carter had a comment.
Yes, and I apologize. I misread that first comment was from Walt Haim, not Don Carter. Please forgive me for the confusion. We have two more questions here. One is from Don Carter. He asks that we please discuss the potential of tolling on I-79 South in Bridgeville/Heidelberg.
yeah. Well, he's speaking of PennDOT's Major Bridge P3 initiative, I think there. And that's an initiative to look at alternative funding through being able to toll major bridges throughout the Commonwealth. And I know they've selected several projects, one of them being the one he mentions here, on I-79 South in the Bridgeville area. I'm not as up. I know it's moving forward. I know there's studies. I mean, I think they're in more of a study phase with this in terms of looking at impacts on traffic and looking at feasibility, things like that. I can't really comment for PennDOT District 11, but I think that's what he's talking about there. It's really that Major Bridge P3 initiative. It's a way of trying to address some of the needs that we have on these major bridges. These needs far outweigh the funding that we have, even just on a regional tip or even in the interstate tip. So there was a push to study, at a statewide level to study these different financing. I guess I'd call them alternatives. And this idea of doing public-private partnerships, P3 methods of tolling these bridges to try to raise funds for those bridges maintenance and upgrade. I guess on the specifics of where we're actually at on that, I don't know if even John can comment on that. It's kind of I think above what he typically works on. But John, is there anything on this that I didn't mention?
Yeah, I don't think that I'll let John speak for PennDOT, but my understanding is there's litigation currently underway, and there's an injunction on with a work stoppage on that, and so it's in terms of our draft tip, it's not on the draft tip from what I understand, right, Brian?
It's not on the region's tip. It would be on the interstate. It's on the statewide interstate program, that project. I'm not sure the funding has fully been identified, and I don't think it's been identified as tolling, but that project is on the statewide managed transportation improvement program for the interstate.
As I understand it, it's currently in litigation. And
yeah, I think you're right about that.
There's a stop work, injunction on it.
Yeah, that's about the extent of my knowledge of where this project is currently. I would probably have to direct more detailed information about the status of that 79 bridge to our executive staff and press office. So sorry, I couldn't add any more here.
And so we will formally respond to all of these comments here in the chat. Shannon, is there anything else? Looks like there's one from Chris West. Did we lose Shannon?
Is she muted?
I don't know.
I am so sorry.
Yeah, there we are.
You'd think I would know how to do this by now, but I'm sorry. Okay, yes. This question is from Chris West, who is the Director of Community Connections at Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. He asks, for the more micro-level projects, have any studies been done on how projects can improve or hurt food insecurity and food deserts and food access? The food bank covers 11 counties in southwestern PA, and we would love to talk about this topic with you for any projects where it makes sense to do so.
Okay. Dom, I guess I would say, to my knowledge, we haven't directly looked at this food access issue. We do dive into different aspects of, within the EJ report, we do dive into some other aspects other than the ones I just showed there on like people's car ownership, transit usage, the kind of the condition of infrastructure in some of these areas. So we do more of a look at that than just the two figures that I showed there. So I think in the future, this type of look would kind of fit into that category of looking at maybe is there underserved populations from this perspective. So I think we would be interested in, looking further into it. We have not done that really that much to do up to this point, but that doesn't mean, we can't discuss the topic and we couldn't maybe work with a type of analysis on that, Don.
So
Ryan, I can add to that a little bit. This is Shannon, and I do know that our economic and workforce development sector is going to be starting a food program, like looking into these kind of issues. We haven't started it yet, but I will be sure, Chris, to make sure that our Director of Economic Development, Jen Lasser, has your comment and your information for when that project does get underway in the near future.
That's good. Thanks.
yeah, I would add to Mr. West, we'd love to make that connection for sure. And also mention that in some of our studies that we've done, corridor studies, for example, I seem to recall we did our Second Avenue multimodal study, which went through the community of Hazelwood, and we got community feedback. And one of the things we looked at was, access to food. And so we do look at that more on the study level. It's interesting that, in terms of like you said, micro level projects, in terms of implementing projects that could facilitate access to food, I think that's a pretty interesting thing to do. But in terms of the studies that come before the projects, we have looked at that. We've had public feedback on that, and we've looked at how far do people have to go to access food. So I thank you for that comment. I think it's a great one.
And Dave Woolwell would like to also address this comment.
Thank you. My name is David Walwell. I'm a program manager, long range planning at Port Authority. And one of my tasks is to develop grant applications. Last year, I developed a grant application for a planning study for a transit project that would link the Strip District with the Hill District with Oakland and Hazelwood, and then extend across the Monongahela River to Carrick and Overbrook. And we submitted a grant to a Federal Transit Administration program called Areas of Persistent Poverty. And one of the supporting documents that we enclosed, or that we referred to make the case that this is a worthwhile project, is analysis of food insecurity in Pittsburgh. And this project would connect several neighborhoods which are designated as having large numbers of people who are food insecure with food resources in the Strip District and a couple other locations, shopping locations. So, we don't know yet whether this study will be funded. This corridor was recommended in Port Authority's long range transit plan. It's a top priority corridor. It was recommended in Next Transit. We were still waiting to hear from Federal Transit Administration as to whether this funding for a planning study would be awarded. And this is not the type of project that would necessarily show up on a tip because it's a planning study. It's not, we're not at a point yet where we're building anything, but I just wanted to make Mr. West aware and everyone else aware that is something that we definitely take into consideration.
Thanks,
Okay.
David.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Phil Wilson, who is the creator of Castle Community Transportation in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. He works closely with the United Way under Gail Young, and he would like to know if we have made any new accommodations for people who live and work in rural areas of Lawrence County for transportation. And I believe that Dave Totten from SPC would like to address this question.
Well, I'll give it a start. I think others might have comments more generally about rural transportation, but specifically about paratransit and shared ride in Lawrence County. One of our partners is on the tip is Allied Coordinated Transportation Services out of Newcastle, and they are on the tip with $1.8 million for small transit buses, also operating assistance which comes from the state at $1.6 million, and a support vehicle they're getting also. And in addition to that, SBC is partnering with Lawrence County and Newcastle Area Transit Authority, and we're working with some researchers from CMU and doing a lot of research on our own for a what's called a transit development plan for Newcastle Area Transit. This is a study that we're pretty good at, that we've been doing for a lot of the small transit agencies, where we look at the service, we look at the business plan, we make recommendations based on the recent reviews that's been done by the state, and make recommendations for improving transit service. And in the case of Lawrence County, we're taking a really innovative, different approach to it with our partnership with one of the brains from CMU, and I think we're going to come up with some really interesting things that will really impact rural, the ability to bring better transit to more rural parts of Lawrence County. If it works, we might have some good ideas to bring to other parts of the region as well. Stay tuned for that. We're still crunching the numbers on it.
Thank you, David. Do we have anything else, Shannon?
I don't see anything else in the chat. Would anybody like to raise their hand and make a comment or ask a question? Hearing none, I think we'll turn it back over to you, Dominic.
Thank you, Shannon. I just want to, if you have any further questions, just contact staff folks here at SBC or at PennDOT. Just want to thank everybody for participating this evening. I hope it was helpful. I hope that we provided useful information to you. Again, our comment period is ending on June 7th. So there are many ways to make comment to our draft documents, which are on our webpage. So again, thank you all for participating, and I really appreciate the questions, the really good questions that were in the chat box this evening. And hopefully everyone can enjoy the rest of their evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dominic. Great job.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Ryan.
Good job, John.
Good job, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Happy holiday weekend, everyone.